Namaste. Welcome to our 32nd Gita talk. Krishna has been talking about the physical preparations for meditation. And now he's talking about yoga. He will say yoga is such and such. And by that he means the yoga life. Yoga comes from yukta, which means join. And in a sense, we should always be in the state of yoga, especially through japa. Our life should be yoga. It should reflect yoga. It should be evident. I remember being I may have told you this, but I don't think I did. I was in a small vegetarian restaurant one time, and this man, smiling, walked up to me and said, "You're a yogi, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I can always tell. Yogis have light around them." And he wasn't a loony. Later, I learned about who he was. He was actually a very important researcher that had just come back from the University of Texas, where he had been engaged in a special project there. So, the yoga life makes the yogi, and the yogi lives the yoga life. They're interdependent. Again, it's not a line, it's a circle. Yoga is not eating too much. This is a difficulty for people who practice fake Raja Yoga. I say fake Raja Yoga because authentic Raja Yoga is meditation, Soham meditation. Sri Gajanan Maharaj made that very clear. But the practices which mess with the pranas, send them here, send them there, send them up, send them down, gather them here, gather them that, energize this chakra, energize that chakra, etc., etc., etc. These people become obsessed with food. and if being obsessed with food is greed, well, they become greedy. They can't help themselves. Sri Swami Ramdas of Kanangad, who is known throughout India as Papa Ramdas, writes about this in his autobiography because he was just doing japa. That's what the phony yogis think. That's all you do is japa. And so he was living in solitude, and he met this man who fancied himself a Raja Yogi. And the man said, "Well, you're not really a yogi if you don't do pranayama, and et cetera, et cetera." So he said, "I'll teach you how to do pranayama." So the Ramdasji was a very guileless person, very intelligent, highly educated, but he was still a very simple person in the right sense. And he was a humble person. So he listened to him, and he then started doing those practices. And whereas he'd been living far out in solitude, eating hardly anything, being completely satisfied, he suddenly started getting really hungry. And he didn't just get hungry, he'd think about things he really wanted to eat. And so when people would come to visit him, he would sometimes say, "Could you get me such and such a thing?" And he would ask them to make certain kind of foods and this and that. And this went on for some time. And suddenly he realized, what's this? First of all, the people come to me to talk about spiritual life, and I want them to go back and get in the kitchen. And why do I have these cravings? And he realized it's Raja Yoga. He quit it, and everything went back to true normal or super normal for his life. So, this is one thing to know also. Stay away from such things. Because yogi friends I had, day and night, they thought about food. They didn't fix it always, but they thought about it. and they figured out what they wanted. All right, yoga is not eating too much, nor is it virtually not eating at all. Those that become cadavers, they look like walking medical experiments, or like they've decided to audition for a movie about victims in a concentration camp. And they think, well, I'm abstemious, and again, I'm controlled, and so on. But it isn't that either. Not the habit of sleeping too much. Oh, I knew a woman who got into one of the insane fads, not a yoga fad, though it pretended to be spiritual. They started out calling themselves, some of you may remember, Zen macrobiotics, not just macrobiotics, Zen. Well, after a while, Zen didn't appeal, times changed, so it just became macrobiotics, which is a crazy diet and one that can destroy health. And I even read an article once by the woman that had been the head of the macrobiotic center in Boston, and of her own experience. It was dangerous, actually. And a friend of mine became fanatically involved. There was nothing she would eat that wasn't part of macrobiotics. She was a brilliant cook. She made the only macrobiotic food I ever ate that was fit to eat. All the other macrobiotic stuff I had was without taste, which Krishna will say is a sign of tamasic food, deadening food. And her health went to pieces. And she had to sleep 11 to 12 hours a day. And she'd say, when you're on macrobiotics, you hardly need any sleep. Now that tells you how wrong her mind had gone. She was saying that in perfect sincerity. It was horrible. She would go to bed before sundown and get up as late as she could before going to her work. It was really sad. And yet, how many times she'd say, you don't need any sleep. Self delusion, you see. But it isn't that, and it's not sleeping and not keeping awake too much either. Because oh, you mustn't get in the habit of too much sleep. You mustn't become addicted to sleep. And then there they are. So if they think they're yogis, then they sit there and it's till the time meditation's over, if they meditate. If they don't, they just go to work and fall asleep. You see, self loathing, there are people that truly hate themselves. And if they're body identified, then because they hate themselves, they hate their bodies. So they torture the body. And this is one of the ways they torture it. You see, certain people, they literally beat themselves. They have whips and they beat themselves. The Roman Catholic Church, perfectly in the old days, perfectly happy about that. It was often considered a virtue. There are monastic orders where once a day they, for 20 minutes, they beat themselves. I shouldn't need to comment anymore on that. So, in other words, all these extremes are to be avoided. For him who is moderate in food and diversion, the idea I'm a yogi, I would never read a fiction book because I would not go to a movie. It's fiddlesticks. Shri, Swami Sri Krishnaji used to say to people who were being super disciplined, why not throw the poor dog a bone? That was his way. Come on. Okay, if you despise yourself, just think it's poor dog. Throw the poor dog a bone. For him who is moderate in food and diversion, disciplined in action, not slipping up and, oh, I should have done that, moderate in sleep and waking, just, in other words, sensible. You can take out the word moderate, say sensible. A yogi is really a sensible person. They're not silly people who are just, oh, devoted to God and oh, to thy mother and all this. Not at all. That's a fool. Having been one, I understand it. All right, let's start again. For him who is moderate in food and diversion, disciplined in action, not afraid to scratch his itch, moderate in sleep and waking, yoga destroys all suffering. But not by, it dissolves it, it melts it away. Peacefully, very peacefully. This is why you do come across the question of the yogi and, well, is a yogi making progress? And there are many yogis who think, well, I'm not making any progress. I'm not really getting anywhere. When the truth is, they are changing for the best all the time. But it's so easily done, so effortlessly done, and so natural because it is your nature to be right where you need to be. Then they don't think anything is happening to them. Uh, Sister Durga, one of Yoganandaji's very early, very wonderful disciples, told me that there was a man that came to visit her and he said, well, I don't get anywhere in meditation. I just sit in meditation, nothing happens. Because he thought he should have all kinds of psychic experiences and leave his body and so on. She said, nothing happens, nothing at all. There's no difference between when you're not meditating and when you're meditating. Well, I do feel this overwhelming bliss. God is Ananda. Yogananda said, God is ever new joy. So he was experiencing his self. But since the self isn't an object as such, he didn't realize he was really succeeding. When he is absorbed in the self alone, and that has to be through japa meditation, with mind controlled, also only through japa meditation, free from longing from all desires, that too is possible only through japa and meditation, and I do mean soham japa and meditation. Then he is known to be steadfast. As a lamp in a windless place flickers not, to such is compared the yogi of controlled mind, performing the yoga of the self. In a windless place, the flame just simply is as if it was painted on a canvas. It doesn't bob up and down, it doesn't go back and forth. It's just there. Though immaterial, it is though it is solid matter, but it's not. And that is, it says, to such is compared the yogi of controlled mind, performing the yoga of the self, adhyatmic yoga. So, first of all, the yogi just has to shut up, get quiet, get still. How interesting that most famous of all Christmas carols is Stille Nacht, still night. Now they sang it as saying silent night, but it means still, both in a sense of yes, silent, but also not moving. This is the yogi. When the mind comes to rest, restrained by the practice of yoga, for yoga does, you don't have to deliberately try to control the mind. Do the sadhana, the mind becomes controlled. The mind starts to becoming normal, and it isn't normal for it to jump around all the time. When the mind comes to rest, restrained by the practice of yoga, beholding the self by the self, in other words, there's no mediatorship here. Like there, well, I have to look at it, and there's my hand. I could even say, "Oh, that's me," which it isn't, but there's something between me and this hand. You see, but when it really comes to rest, beholding the self by the self is the only faculty through which we can perceive ourselves. See, it is the witness, both in the sense of witnessing ourselves as object and witnessing ourselves as subject. This is very, very important to know because all kinds of silly books and things are written about meditation. And they have tricks to get the mind to settle, gimmicks to be able to do the misery producing breathing exercises. But in real yoga, none of that is needed. Contentment in the self. People who are outside here and there, going on pilgrimage, doing this and that, they haven't gotten yet to real yoga. He is content in the self. He knows that endless joy, doesn't say overwhelming joy. There are people that like to fall over and go and be going like this, Ella Fern, she was one of these fakes that operated in the uh, early days of the yoga boom. Sorry, I'm trying to position myself right. Uh, and she was, and she was always bobbing. That's another thing. When you know somebody who thinks they're a yogi and they sit and they kind of go, they're not yogis, unless they've got neurological problems. And I've seen people smile and just say, and they kind of, they're really kind of going in a circle. Yeah, sure. Just as there was remember the Fireside Theater, they had a character who says, I'm really high on myself. And they're very high on, of course, the lower self, but there we are. He knows that endless joy, which is apprehended by the buddhi beyond the senses, there's no emotion there. The buddhi is the intellect, the intelligent mind, the reasoning mind, yes. That, established in that. See, how is it endless? One, it doesn't mean if you once experience it, you'll never stop experiencing it. But the ananda isn't endless, is didn't stop and it didn't begin. The ananda was there always and you didn't see it. It's like we go looking for something, and then right where we've been looking, we say, oh, there it is, and we pick it up. So you see, ananda is our nature. It never began, it will never end. But it's sort of like stepping onto a slide walk. You've got to step on it to be moving. If you step off, you're not moving. So you see, Buddha talks about this. He would put the word right in front of things, like right meditation. He talked about right ananda. The right ananda is ananda you've always had, but you don't know it, and then you do know it. What a wonderful thing. Beyond the senses, he means the outer senses, because in our Antakarana we have subtle senses, and we do experience through those subtle senses in meditation. And established in that, he does not deviate from the satya, the real, the true, his own self. Settling, he doesn't have to think, I got to be in the self. No, when he is in that condition that is the condition of the self, then he doesn't turn away. And you can see there is behavior of being in and being out. And we ought to check on ourselves to see that that's happening. And I know people who are not good people who don't want to be perceived love to say, judge not lest you be judged. Well, we are all going to be judged. So you can forget that idea. Uh, but we have to read this and say, is this me? Is this me? We don't really need to apply it to another person, because who are they? They could be in infinite consciousness, and we could be in the most finite consciousness. It wouldn't help us, so who cares? But look at other people too. After all, your eyes look outward and they see objects. So use your head. Use your head. I remember this Greek lady that she came. I was staying in a Greek monastery, and she was the mother of the abbot. And she came and visited us, and she had, shall we say, a pungent personality. Well, we got along just fine. The other monks were sort of spooked by her, but I, being um, not so sacred, uh, we managed fine. I mean, she knew what in Kentucky we call an old rip. If you don't know the meaning, there's no way to explain. Um, but anyway, the very last day she was there, she said something to someone. I used to know, but I've forgotten. And he answered back, one of the monks, such and such, no, we do such and such. And I suddenly hear her shout, may God give you brains. So I took a piece of paper and I wrote it on as a motto, and I put it up in the kitchen. May God give you brains. But may God give us brains. Sri Ramakrishna would say, be a devotee, but why a fool? And that means you've got to be able to know what a fool is and not be a fool. And know who's a fool, and you don't want to be like them. Yes, that's the truth. But he who says to his brother Raka is in danger of hellfire. Well, that means to just be hateful and nasty and, and just say, hey, fool. I don't mean it that way. But you know something. If you're not able to be a fool or say fool, you either am I, then we're all fools. That's the real truth. So, with that sour note, namaste. Namaste.